Born in Austria, under alpine skies, to Wilhelm and Annie, both seekers wise. In Freud's circle they carved their way, but Ava found her own to play. She treated all with equal grace, a healing light, a quiet space, moved from war to a freer land. With just her presence laid a hand. In Maine she learned at birth and end that nature speaks if we just bend. She watched, she listened, sang through pain, and bodies open like the rain. Her mother cut to find the soul, her father sought the armored role. But Ava's hands, they knew the art to gently open every heart. Her mother cut to find the soul, her father sought the armored role. But Ava's hands, they knew the art to gently open every heart. Organ blankets warm and kind, wrapped round mother's worn and blind. She brought them back with breath and song, held them safe where they belong. She turned bridge babies soft and low, helped them find the path to go. From Europe's states, Japan she came, yet few today recall her name. She saw the wounds in grown-up eyes and turned instead to newborn cries. She said, clients teach more than schools, and shunned the therapy of rules. No need for lifelong endless care, just touch the soul and leave it there. A mother, teacher, friend of birth, she walked with peace upon this earth. She didn't speak of what she knew, but left a trail deep and true. She lived the moment, clear and free. Can you hear the birds like she?
So welcome, Richard Overley. It's an absolute pleasure and delight to be here with you to discuss not only some of your own work, but the life and works of Dr. Ava Reich. And having just listened to a podcast, I could say an audio lecture that she gave before she passed away, the dynamism and enthusiasm and work that she has done already got me very excited for this interview. So thank you so much for being here with us and representing Ava. So
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. So what I'd like to do for our audience is read a brief introduction to Dr. Ava Reich, and then we'll go on and hear from Richard. So Dr. Ava Reich, from 1924 to 2008, was a pioneering physician, educator, and healer whose work centered around gentle, holistic approaches to health, particularly in the field of birth, touch, and early emotional development. Daughter of Wilhelm Reich, a controversial psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, Ava continued and humanized her father's work, focusing on energy medicine, the bonding process between mother and child, and biodynamic touch therapy. She is perhaps best known for developing gentle bioenergetics and promoting butterfly touch massage, a technique now used worldwide in neonatal and palliative care. Her lifelong mission was to reconnect science with compassion and to restore warmth and contact to the birth and healing processes. So what a legacy. So to begin, Richard, could you briefly introduce yourself and share how you came to know and work with Dr. Ava Reich?
Okay, I'm Richard Overley, Dick Overley. And I met Eva Reich in 1985. And prior to that, I had been working in the psychotherapy world since about 1968 as a pastor, American Baptist minister, and we carried like Martin Luther King's credentials when no one else would. And we also had women pastors long before it was the end thing. So it was a very progressive American Baptist tradition. And I was involved in that, and then kind of realized I wasn't cut out to be a minister. I wasn't a politician. I really wasn't an administrator, and I didn't fit in that framework very well. So um, then it kind of messed it up, actually, because I didn't use those skills very well. And then I got a chance to go into the therapy realm at Family Service in Warren, Ohio. And I really enjoyed that. I got to work with kids. I got to get involved in training. I learned transactional analysis, Gestalt, the integration of those two. And then in 1985, I'd been in private practice for a while. Um, I had a difficult ending to a relationship. I was surprised. Everyone else was surprised. We didn't really fit together, but I was devastated when she decided to move on with somebody else. She didn't break any contracts. We had never made a commitment. I asked her to make a commitment, and she said, I'm in love with two people. And it just was crushing. I didn't realize that I bonded with her. And so I was involved in some therapy, and the person I was working, it was some body work. And one of the people I was working with, I went to see her and I said, my head feels like an eggshell. And she said, that sounds like a birth memory.
Mhm.
Okay, made sense to me. She said, let's do a visualization of your birth. She didn't have the techniques that Eva Reich integrated, a psychodrama birth or anything like that. So I said, okay. So I was sitting there and she was going through this beautiful scene of my birth. And it was really great, but it didn't have anything to do with me.
Mhm.
I didn't want to interrupt her because it didn't fit. It just wasn't anybody. It was a beautiful story, but it didn't fit me. So when she was over, though, the one good thing came out of it, she said, if you ever get a chance to meet Eva Reich and do her psychodrama birth, I hope you'll do that. I went home. In my mailbox was a flyer for an Eva Reich workshop about a 6-hour drive away. I'd gotten those many times and ignored them because I'd been working in a Reichian kind of therapy that was different than what Eva was doing. And I thought she'd just do the same thing. So I called the man and said, I got your brochure, but it was late. And he said, yeah, we just got them out. And I said, well, that kind of fits what I do. Can we still come? I had a friend who wanted to go. And he said, sure. And I said, well, my friend, are people going to work with clothing on or off in this setting? Because in some of these settings back then, people were working in the underwear. Once in a while, somebody worked naked. And I felt my friend will be very, very uncomfortable with that. And he said, don't worry about that. Eva does not work that way. So I went to the workshop. My friend went with me. And she taught that time. One day was introduction, and the next 3 days were advanced training with techniques and tools. And so the introduction didn't make much sense to me, in all honesty. But the next 3 days were amazing. It's like I never knew what she was going to do next. And I'd been involved in an agency and seen many, many different kinds of therapies, Gestalt, reality therapy, behavior modification, family systems theory, really good stuff. And I knew it, and I could pretty well tell what the therapist was going to do next out of their model. I never knew what Eva was going to do next. One time she was working with somebody, she didn't even touch them. And the person started to cry, and I thought, where'd that come from? She didn't say anything, she didn't do anything. And another time, the person curled up like a little baby, and she just said, somebody stay with them, we'll come back to them. Just let them stay with that. there wasn't much of this getting up and hitting pillows and discharging all this violence and anger. There's a lot of Reichian stuff and what I had been familiar with. That was only one person that did that, and that was my anger that she said, you need to discharge this. So it was amazing. And she also said to one person, we're gonna do this metamorphosis thing with you where you maybe go back into in utero memories. And my response was, yeah, right. That's what happened. And I had propped myself up on a pillow to watch because they'd done a balance on me and I couldn't move. It was so powerful. I felt like I stuck my finger in an electrical socket and my whole body just jumped and then I couldn't move. And so I watched. To my amazement, when they were doing this on the foot, just on the foot, just gentle touching. Excuse me. And as I watched it, she began to move like a fetus. And I'd seen that in movies from my child psychology programs in university. And I thought, that's amazing. What was more amazing, when she was done, her whole body had changed. It was transformed into a very soft, kind of floppy personality. And even more significant, she came back 6 months later, which is what the pattern was, and she had changed. And I went back home from that, and I started to use some of the techniques that Eva taught there with my clients. I had a full practice. And with the one lady, she came to me because she was having difficulty with a relationship. And I said, okay. And I thought to myself, I learned this thing I think that would help her. But how is she going to let me put my hands all over while she lies on a mat? Because she was just referred to me as a talk therapist. So I described this thing to her. I said, we can do it next time. And she said, okay, I'd like to do that. And you can bring a friend if you feel safer bringing a friend. And I don't need to bring a friend. I trust you. And I realized I was more afraid than she was. So she came. I did this, what we call gentle bioenergetics balance with her. She went home, set up an appointment for the next week, called me shortly before that time and said, I'm not coming back. I'm having fun again. I'm going out tonight. And said, I want to go with my friend. I said, okay, I'll come back next week. I said, okay. A little bit later that week, I got another call for her saying, I don't think I need to come back. I'm having fun again. I'm alive. I'm connected. And that's exactly what Eve had said would happen with this stuff, that it was like magic for me. I called it that. And some people would say that was resistance. She was, in the older therapies, they would be saying, oh, she's just resisting, not really dealing with stuff. I don't think so. I think she got what she wanted, and that's all she needed to enjoy her life. And she could come back more later if she needed to, rather than pushing her to do stuff. So I went back to Eva's workshops 6 months later, and I was there for another introduction. She said, why are you here? Your program begins tomorrow. And I said, well, I want to review that because I didn't get as much out of it. And so she let me, and it was another wonderful experience. I went back another time, another introduction. Why are you here? You don't need to be here till tomorrow. And I said, well, you teach it differently every time you've taught it. And I think I'll get more out of it. And I think I want to help make this available. And she said, well, why don't you be my assistant in this area? And I was very hesitant, and people there said, no, you can do it. And they encouraged me. So I went to her and I said, I'd like to try this. And that was the beginning of our connection. I think the other connection is Eva was very much into healing prayer. She had studied that with Jimmy Carter's sister and Agnes Sanford, Ruth Carter Stapleton and Agnes Sanford. And she was very much into the healing prayer of Jesus. And sometimes she would say, this is way beyond the realm of psychotherapy. We don't have enough time. We don't have the tools. Would you like us to lay our hands on you and say a healing prayer? And she would invite everybody to do that. And she started to ask me to say the healing prayer. She knew I'd been a minister and that I believed in that. I wasn't really involved in a church at that time. didn't fit for me. But that did. And it was very powerful. And that's been one of the favorite things in my training programs for people at the end of that experience. And we've had Hindu prayers, Buddhist prayers, Jewish prayers, naturalist prayers, all different kind of prayers and people laying on hands, and it's just been a wonderful healing experience. And
Mm,
that came from Eva. And
beautiful.
yeah, it's kind of amazing. And because at that time, most psychotherapy people were calling prayer crutch, that it really wasn't meaningful. That's not true anymore. But back in the 1980s, that's where people viewed it in the psychotherapy realm. You were a
Mm.
wacko if you believed in that stuff.
So this actually started off your whole, since then, your
Yeah,
life and work with Eva and her work,
yes,
her legacy, I can say, because
yeah,
from what I've been reading, she has left a lot. And
yes.
so I'd like if we could just go back to get a sense of who is Eva Reich. If you could describe her historical and cultural landscape in which she was born in 1924 and how this shaped her. I believe she was an immigrant. Was she born in the US?
No,
Okay.
no, she was born in
So,
Europe. Uh, so let me say one other thing, and that I'll come back to later. I used to think that Eva's magic in her work was in the tools and the techniques. After doing it for so many years and looking back on it, I realized that wasn't the key to gentle bioenergetics. The tools are like magic, but the real key is the way she approached people. And
mm,
we could talk more about that. I think that's the real significant difference in her work and other people's work.
mm,
Eva was born into a family. Wilhelm Reich, who was the founder of body psychotherapy in the Western world, father of that, he was an assistant of Freud's and began to
so
touch
which country were we in? Were they
Austria.
when she was in Austria? Okay.
Yeah, Austria. And they were in Austria and Germany back and forth. And her mother was also part of that group. So both parents were a part of that group. When her mother was pregnant with her, this I know, she was studying to be a doctor, and she was required to dissect bodies.
Mhm.
And Eva never had a very good relationship with her mother. It was always distant, disconnected, and even some real struggles with it other than that. And but when she did a metamorphosis kind of thing, which is getting back to memories from in utero, she experienced being on a pink pillow and warm, fuzzy, and then it didn't last. And she realized there was a time when her mother embraced her. And that was an aha to her, that there was a time there was a closeness, but then it got destroyed because her mother armored, shut herself down, and Eva was the benefactor of, well, it wasn't a benefactor, it was an impact on Eva's life for a long time. They never had closeness.
Mm. And you
Uh,
said so the mother who was learning and medicine and just dissecting what animals, I guess,
Bodies,
body,
human bodies.
bodies, okay. And so did she talk about how this affected her in utero?
Just that mom's energy withdrew.
Oh,
Mom
okay.
withdrew
So
her
that was
energy, and she felt very isolated,
okay.
very contracted. And that was the big thing for her,
Okay.
that there wasn't any connection
Mm,
at that time. And that was one of the important things for her in life, was getting so that mom and baby had a connection. And if she could get that connection, then she thought the birth would go well. And if there wasn't that connection, that's the one of the things she wanted to work with, not just the obstetrics and the birthing of the baby, but that connection was
The
flat
love,
all over.
loving connection.
Yeah. And her father was an associate of Freud's and also began to work with the body and began to touch the body. And I think he also got into idea of sexual abuse and physical abuse was a real thing. And I think that was a problem for the psychiatrist back then because he was working with some of their kids who were saying they had been abused. And some of the psychiatrists didn't like that because their parents were going to not go and stay in therapy with them if Reich was making these accusations. Similar to some problems the Catholic Church went through a while back, or maybe still now, and other churches, and wanting to save face rather than dealing with the reality of what was going on and getting to heal that.
Mm.
I think it was a political move that Reich had problems with the Freudians and went out on his own. And even described that she remembered in life that her father came to the door all dressed in winter clothing, knocking on the door saying he was going over the mountains, fleeing to the Scandinavian countries because there was a price on his head between both Hitler and Stalin.
Wow.
And he left. And the mother stayed with the Freudian people. And the mother also tried to brainwash Eva against her father's work. And she did something very unprofessional. She got involved with Eva's therapist, who was working with some of the problems Eva had that were probably because of the birth beginnings. And but the therapist breached confidentiality and mother breached confidentiality, talking back and forth with each other, trying to convert Eva away from her father's work. And eventually, I think it was 1939, Eva would have been about 15. They fled to the United States. They were on one of the last boats out
Okay.
before Hitler came in. And that was the setting of where they grew up, with that mechanicalism of society and
Mm.
ultra conservative and rigid.
And so they were Jewish, a Jewish family?
I don't think they were either one, but they had the name that might have associated them with being Jewish.
Mm.
I don't think that, no, they were not Jewish.
I just didn't want to be in that environment and leave, I guess.
Yeah.
Mm.
They could have been labeled as Jewish, I guess, but um, uh, they fled. And then Reich later went to the United States, and she got acquainted with Reich and loved his work. In the
So
19
the parents split up then?
They split up,
Okay.
and she never had a good relationship with her mother. But the one thing her mother did do is she wrote a sex education book that Eva said was being used in Austria and said it was also being used in South America. And that was one thing that Eva appreciated about her mother, was educating young women understanding sexuality. So they knew what was happening when they got pregnant. Otherwise, they didn't know. There wasn't that kind of education we have now to understand what was going on in their bodies.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
And so Ava stayed with her mother,
Eva stayed with her mother.
and then the mother and Ava moved to the US? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And then somehow or other, she split up with her mother and went to work with her father in Maine, in Orgononia Center up in Maine, and eventually became a rural medical doctor up in Maine. And that's where she really got involved in natural birth, was up in Maine, because they didn't have hospitals. The births were done at home.
Mm.
And she did all her own lab work in her home. And in her home, the living room was her examination room. And when she had appointments, the family went into the kitchen.
So this is when Ava had already become a doctor.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
She had become a doctor, early female doctor. Yeah. And she was also connected with her father's work at that time.
And so, what brought her to want to be a doctor? Was that a medical doctor?
I don't know that she ever really talked about that to me. Um, I draw a blank on that one.
Okay,
I think it was because that's what people in the family did. And so that's what she was going to do.
okay. So
And
both her parents were medical doctors,
yeah,
and she wanted obviously to follow in their footsteps. And so, is there a significant childhood story or memory that Eva did share, which sheds light on who she became as a person and a professional? I mean, you've already talked about
yeah.
the early beginnings and the attachment with the mother. Is there anything else that comes to mind?
Uh, Not as a child, except maybe that she played a lot as a child. She loved to play. She loved to swim. She loved to read. She loved to ski. And I
Mm,
think her father played. I don't know about her mother, but she learned that somewhere. And she felt that was important. Even in a workshop, sometimes she would say, we need to have a time of play." And she would
mm.
buy some model airplanes to fly. You need to have
Fantastic.
some fun too. It doesn't
Yes.
all need to be serious.
Yeah, definitely. So,
She would cook dinner for us as a group. That was one of the things she loved to do.
mm,
So she was very much an equal. And I think that came from how she grew up, but not because that's how her parents treated her or that's how her parents treated other people but because she saw that that was not healthy and she was going to treat everybody as an equal.
mm,
And that was the basic process of her work was treating everybody that she encountered as an equal. We're in this together. We're not perfect mothers. We're never going to be perfect mothers, which is what Reich wanted to make people perfect mothers. And she told him, get over it. We're not perfect. We're not going to be perfect. You don't
mhm,
have a right to tell us who to marry. You don't have a right to tell us when to have children. That's our decision. And I think that came out of growing up in that kind of system in a family and decided that wasn't what she wanted. And she learned the principles of that in terms of self-regulation from her father. I don't know about her mother, but she implemented it in a way differently than what they had done it. She felt that should apply to everybody. And that's how she worked.
mm. So,
Out
was
of
there anybody else who was very influential in the early days for her? Obviously, her parents, you've said, but anybody else that she'd come across that influenced her?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Later in life, Ruth Carter Stapleton, Agnes Sanford, and another minister up in her hometown area.
Well, when did that come in?
Hmm?
About what time did that connection come in her life?
I would guess that was probably in the 1940s.
Okay.
Um, and um, yeah,
So she decided to become a pediatrician,
she was a full medical doctor.
a medical doctor,
She
and
wasn't. She
then
wasn't just a pediatrician.
okay, a pediatrician is a specialist in child medicine.
Yeah, no, she
Um,
was a full-fledged doctor. She did everything in Maine, but she did an internship in pediatrics at one time in Harlem Hospital, which was rather dramatic for her, doing that in Harlem Hospital.
so can you tell us about that?
She had a mystic who was her supervisor, and he allowed her to do some of the things like with a little orgone blanket that was made from sterile gauze and steel wool to get energy for the babies who weren't thriving into their bassinet. And he was comfortable with her doing her butterfly touch massage on the babies.
So you'll have to tell us about this because we're getting into the nuts and bolts now. First of all,
Yeah.
what was the organ that she was using?
Reich developed an instrument whereby you could collect life energy and transmit it to the body. And it was made from alternating layers of steel wool and cotton batting, inorganic and organic material, and usually 3 layers. And he made them like they were little telephone booths to the size of the people. Even discovered in traveling around Europe, you could make it in blankets. And it was just as efficient and possible. You couldn't, the homes in Europe were too small to have one of those things in them. So she made 3 foot by 3 foot or a meter by meter blankets, sometimes out of used material, so it wasn't very expensive. And you can buy the blankets online for $150 to $250, $300, sometimes $500. They're not worth it.
And
I
so,
would never.
so what would they do? What was
Well, the
the
idea was it would collect energy from the atmosphere, the orgone, which is what he called the life energy, and then would transmit it to the body. And the body would then regenerate itself, either in a healing process or an energetic flow.
and she would use this in pediatrics with newborns or?
She would just make a little sterile gauze for newborns. She
Okay.
would make just she wouldn't put it over the baby. She would just put it in the incubator for the energy. And she found it warmed up the incubator and
Oh.
helped the baby. It's not a toy. You have to be careful with it because people can get overcharged.
Mm.
But she used it in the birth process. When mother was getting exhausted, she would put the blanket over between labor waves. Mom could get recharged and continue for a while. It was a way of recharging the mother. And she also applied the principle of it. It's a charge-discharge principle. If the energy charges and then it discharges, and then it harmonizes, and then the process starts over again. And she applied that to breastfeeding
Mm.
because the charge also is the attractions of fluids. It's in the sexual orgasm, but it's also in the birth, it's in the weather, it's in the sea, it's in all of life. It's a natural wave. And she found that if she could put a funnel over the breast, the mother's breast would get engorged with milk if she didn't have milk, and then she could feed her baby. And she used that principle to do that with an orgone blanket for the breast, which was really a mole or a funnel. That's one of the things she talked about in the speech that you made reference to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how that works. So we've taught people how to do that. And it
And is
works.
that continuing today?
Yeah,
Is
some
that
people are doing that. I've taught it to people around the world, taught it to some midwives and doulas, and they do it. It's one of the tools that continues to today.
fantastic? It sounds as if it should be much more known and made available.
It would be, yeah,
Mm.
that's part of what I would hope for. Uh, and also to help mother when she gets exhausted. It could be because that happens in birth. It's work, and she
Mm.
can get exhausted, and the blanket can help her to continue on. Or in the day-to-day life, when she gets exhausted, it can help her to get recharged.
Mm.
And you can make, in the United States, you can make them for under $20. Going to Walmart or a store and getting the steel wool cotton batting and a sheeting cover to put over it, you could make it for under $20.
Mm.
So it's not, I would never encourage somebody to do it the other way. You can also make it out of scraps that people have if they're, the key is organic, not cotton or wool. And the steel wool is the best organic. That's the best inorganic material. The organic is the cotton wool and like that. Somebody said you need to make them out of silk for even better. That's not my experience. That's a sale gimmick, I think. And
So this is available if anybody wants to look it up, they'd be able to find this.
yeah, it's in the books that I have. We have it online. James DeMeo has put it out in a book as well. So it's available out there. And
Fantastic.
I tell people how to make them. We make them sometimes for people, but we don't charge $150, $200 for them.
Mm.
We get about our shipping costs out of them. But it's not exactly a toy. It's
No.
kids got under them for 48 hours, 72 hours, and got as high as on drugs.
Wow. And
So
has this been researched in labs to see what happens, or is it more sort of
Reich was doing a lot of research in this area before he went to prison. This is what he went to prison for.
Oh, okay.
But I actually don't think it's what he went to prison for. He went to prison because he said there was a coalition between the Food and Drug Administration, the Medical Association, and pharmaceutical companies. And he was very foolish to do that. I think they would have left him alone if he hadn't attacked them, because they didn't care. It was when he attacked them and their pocketbooks that then they struck out at him.
That's
Yeah,
that's the way it usually goes.
yeah, it
So
can.
if we can go back to Harlem where she was working
Right.
in kind of environment, and that had
One of the things she learned about Harlem was she learned from the people. Same thing as in Maine. She learned about natural birth in Maine and natural death because she would go to the homes and they would say, "You're turning this into a medical process. Get out of here." And she said, "I had to learn how to do it the way they did it so I could be their doctor."
Mm,
So she learned from them. And in the hospital, she saw these Haitian women. She was wondering, where's the easiest births in the world? And they said the easiest first births are on the Caribbean islands, Haitian women. And she saw them. They were singing, "Oh, Lordy, Lordy." And the babies were popping out. And it was because of the opening, the whole opening of the body, and the diaphragm was coming forward, the pelvic segment was coming forward, and the open throat, and the babies were popping out. And she was going around telling the people, okay, ah, ah, instead of it's ah. And that
okay.
was one of the tools that she did. And it was amazing. I did that with one young woman who was having a first birth. And the midwife was taking her time to get to the house. I wasn't in the birthing process. The mother and the father were in the birthing process, but I was walking by the door and I heard her going, "Rrr," and I said, "No, oh," because I had taught her that. And all of a sudden I heard, "Oh," and the baby came out.
Beautiful,
And it
beautiful.
was like, now, did that cause that? I'm not really sure because she was really good at helping the baby to come out. The mother learned, and I learned from her. Uh, And that was a philosophy Eva had. She let people work on her around the world, and then she learned from the things they did and would integrate that into the process as she worked with it.
So over the time, I'm getting the feeling, and correct me if I'm not right, that she was experimenting, living, learning, and then she put together little by little her own set of tools, let's say, which was the gentle bioenergetics. Is that correct?
That's pretty close to it.
And so if you could tell us what is this
That's
now
pretty close to it.
when it becomes gentle bioenergetics, what is that?
Well, she started to call it that pretty early as a first aid, a way of working people back before 1980s. That's how she described her work. She described it as a first aid. It was in that speech that you listened to. She described it as a first aid rather than an ongoing psychotherapy model.
Mhm.
Excuse me. And that's basically what it was for her. She didn't like the dependency of long-term therapy. She felt that that was for the benefit of the therapist, not the benefit of the client. And she didn't like that one-upmanship, as I had said. Um, I have a rule that came out of all this when I teach my students. I say to them, if you will approach your clients as you will learn more from them
Mm,
than you will ever teach them,
mm,
you'll be effective.
yeah.
If you're going to approach teaching them how to live life out, it's not going to work.
Mm,
And I got that away from Eva, but I also saw it from a grandmother who was probably in her 40s or 50s. She'd only had a sixth grade education, I think. I learned more from her
Mhm.
than the doctors or the master's degree people that came through my office.
Mm.
She was smart, and
Mm.
it works
Yeah,
if you
just
approach people.
listening. Mm.
Yeah. So in Harlem Hospital, she went around and learned that stuff. She also started out with her butterfly touch. She got that from Wilhelm Reich because she saw him touch very lightly on the surface of the skin and measured that the energy would come out.
So how would she measure the energy?
He had a way of measuring it. It's in the
Oh,
bioelectrical experiments. I
okay.
don't know. I
Mm.
haven't reproduced those studies. Other
So
people,
can you show us what kind of touch? I mean, how?
yeah. Can I get my arm up high enough? Yeah, it's a touch like that.
Okay, so what we would call, yeah, light touch.
Very light touch.
Mm.
Yeah. Sometimes you could touch your eyelids.
Eyelids, okay.
Just a very light touch on your eyelids. That's
Okay.
a level of touch. And the energy will come out, except for anger. When you probe deeply, the energy pulls inward, but anger will still come out. That's why sometimes a heavy touch can be good with anger. But the other stuff goes deeper into the body. The primal stuff, the anxiety, the fear will go deeper. So she took that, and along with watching him, he was very gentle with babies and children, Reich himself. And she saw that. And she then developed this butterfly touch, which is so gentle that if you're holding the butterfly and you let it go, the scales won't be on your fingertips. That's another way of looking at that light touch.
Mm.
And she found out that armor would melt rather than breaking it down. And if armor is for survival, the muscles we tighten, all of the lifestyles we have, if it's for survival, then you don't want to break it down.
Mm.
You want to soften it. And she said that the Reichian people would only train medical doctors and psychiatrists. They wouldn't train someone like me. And she said that probably makes sense if you're going to break down the armor. Because if you break it down, somebody gets schizophrenic or goes into a catatonic state, you've got to be able to protect them. Only doctors basically can put people in a hospital to protect them. So her work broadens to the whole rest of the world because it's so gentle. So that
Mm.
came out of that work with her father that she saw, and then her experience of touching in that way and seeing 250-pound men's armor melt
Mm.
as she worked with hard, tough men, and they would just soften. The organism would soften.
Mm.
And when she went to Harlem Hospital, she developed that butterfly touch into a pattern, calling it butterfly touch massage. I think she'd done it before, but she started to use it as a pattern in the hospital. And babies started to come alive. They started to get pink and rosy.
Mm.
And that was an aha to her. And for some people, they got the idea that butterfly touch massage was her only way of working with people. By far, it's not. It's maybe not even the most important. It's the most important that everyone can do. You don't have to pay a therapist to do it.
Mhm.
Anyone can do it and can learn how to do it. So you don't, it's not something you have to make money off of.
Mm.
But it's not necessarily the best tool for everything. It's
Mm.
a very valuable tool, but there's some that are more important in the overall picture. But that's just one of them. That's one of 30 some that
Mm.
were in there.
So what would you say that was her driving like quest? Was it really that her mission to help bring babies into the world, connected with the mother? How would she have said was her life mission?
I think I would maybe say it a little bit differently.
How would Ava have said it?
I think she would say that she saw so much suffering in adults from their beginning experiences that she decided not only do we need to help them heal this, we need to change the birthing practices so that they don't have to do therapy 30 years later.
Yes.
So I think she called it humanizing humanity was one of the phrases she used for general bioenergetics was the process, but kind of the goal was to humanize humanity. And I think that she saw that happening in dealing with the primal time. And
So what,
help.
what I'm hearing is so healing maybe children and adults from a difficult birth, and then working with mothers so that they prevent this. Is that correct? She did both sides?
Yes, she would go back and forth.
Mm.
She
And,
saw with working with pregnant mothers that she could get this breath wave or orgasmic wave to go all the way through the body in one session.
and how would she do that?
Um, Number of different ways. She first saw it by working with them to breathe down and becoming aware of how they could open their body. She didn't try to break it down. She just worked with them to learn how they could open their body all the way through.
Mm.
And she was amazed it could happen. But then in about 1980, I think it was, she ran into polarity therapy. And she said, polarity therapy could do in one session what I've been trying to do for 25 years.
Wow.
It was amazing to her. So she integrated polarity therapy as a way of getting this wave to go all the way through.
Okay.
And
And
that's con that's con
sorry, who started polarity therapy?
Randall Stone,
Okay.
you know, and she integrated that and it became, I call it the general bioenergetics balance. Nobody in polarity therapy knows about it because I've trained in polarity. I've talked to some of the leaders. No one knows anything about this balance. Supposedly, a friend of Eva's learned it from Randolph Stone in Australia, taught it to her. But nobody in the United States or in Europe that I've encountered knew of this balance before I showed it to them. They didn't know it.
And can you tell us again what the balance is?
It's placing your hands on, it's bone to bone contact, very gentle, passive, not trying to make something happen. You just allow the energy to flow and you connect points and all through the body. You connect elbow and wrist, you connect various points through the body. And it follows the segmental armoring in Reichian therapy from the head to the toes. And people can feel the energy streaming through the body. Often they can feel it as it just opens and flows. And Eva found it really good to do when people had operations, surgeries, broken bones, where they weren't where they were disconnected from their bodies. Uh, Pregnant woman where she really didn't feel her pelvis, or there wasn't any energy down in that, and she just got that to go through. And
Mm.
metamorphosis was another one that it's just done on the instep of the foot, from the tip of the toe to the base, and it's
Yeah.
just very, very light touching.
Mm. I
And
knew Gaston Saint-Pierre, who I think started that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I
I
know.
didn't start it. They started it, but she changed it by integrating it into working with um, in utero and conception experiences. They were basically, she learned it from them. They were doing it with for developmental things, which is good. It's a
Mm.
good thing. She saw it brought back the memory of in utero experiences. But she also saw that if you did it reflexively, it could save a baby's life. Because when mom's pregnant, she should be hot. Two energy fields there, and mom's body should be hot. And Eva discovered that if you did the metamorphosis, if she was cold, if the pelvic segment was cold, undercharged, you could get it charged up so that it would the energy would flow and there was a better possibility the baby could survive. Some midwives, I taught it to midwives in Greece, and a couple of midwives took it back Eva never talked about this, but they had breech babies presenting breech.
Mhm.
They did the metamorphosis on them, and the baby turned. And they were amazed. They came back and asked me, "Do you know about this?" I said, "No." It was a surprise to me. But two of them did not. There's not enough research to say that's conclusive. It's just,
Oh, cool.
it did
Anecdotal.
happen. Um, it was the kind of thing where in a regressive technique, Eva got back to the experience that was good at one time with her mother. It was life-changing for her. For me, when they did it on me, it's been life-changing because it got me back to where mom tried to abort me.
Mm.
And I didn't know that. I knew she said she didn't want to have me. I knew she didn't want to have another baby after she'd had a first baby. She told me that stuff. Not to heal, but because she didn't want my grandmother to tell me, and I would be on my dad's side instead of hers, which wasn't going to happen. But she didn't tell me to heal it or say I was sorry. She just did it to justify herself. But for me, it was eye-opening. What I realized was is she tried to get rid of me.
How did that feel?
Um, Enlightening,
Mm.
some anger, some
Mm.
sadness. Um, every time I go into a room, a group of people, or go to see somebody I've never met, there's always this uneasiness. Am I going to be liked? Am I going to be wanted there?
Mm.
I've never gotten over that. I've had many metamorphoses. I don't live out of that now, but I still can have that emotional feeling that I don't know if that ever leaves. I don't know if it ever left for me. I don't have to live out of it, but it made it possible I could move to live anywhere in the world because I was
Mm.
living within 20 minutes of where I was born. And
Mm.
all of that began to make sense. I was
Mm.
trying to heal something. And so for me, it's a very powerful tool. It's life changing.
Mm.
And I had women, two women at least. One came to me when I was teaching in a massage school, and the doctor had said, "The baby's going to come out too soon. Is there anything you can do?" I was teaching techniques on lunch hour. And I thought, gosh, I don't know. And so I did this metamorphosis, and a miracle happened. The baby stayed in, was born full term, and was fine. I had another woman come to me who was going to have a natural birth. She'd gone to her doctor, this was in Poland, and doctor told her, "We got to take the baby out because the baby's coming out. And you can't wait to have that natural." And she was devastated. So I said, "Well, we tried this. You want to do it again?" She said, "Yeah." So we did it. And I told my associate, teach the father to do it, who was a doctor. And he did it. Baby came out full term. And
Mm.
she said, I could feel the baby coming out of my body. They didn't take that away from me this time. She had two other kids that they took it away. And
Mm.
so that's what makes it worthwhile doing this stuff when I hear those stories. Sometimes I get discouraged, but when people
Don't
tell
we
me
all?
those, yeah, when people tell me those stories, that kind of brings chills and makes it worthwhile. So
Absolutely.
that's a lot of stuff, but that's some of the things I, that's why I could see that the magic for me was the tools, but it really isn't. It's because of people, Eva approached people to figure out what it was they could do to help them to discover how they're stopping themselves
Mm.
and approach them as equals, not that I'm going to do this to you and it's going to save you,
Yeah.
but let's see what happens together. And that's a whole different process of working with people.
Mm. Definitely, I would see is really the heart-centered process of connection,
Yeah.
human connection, human touch, human rapport,
Mhm.
love. And so what would if Eva was here today, what would you say that her most strong message that she would want to have everybody hear would be what?
That's a good question.
Maybe to practitioners or students or parents or
Well,
or anybody.
she would treat them all the same.
Mm.
I think it would be something like maybe we can win this if we treat each other as human beings and wash feet, wash people's feet.
And
And
did she do that?
yeah, she practiced that. That was one of her beliefs is we're here to be the servants of other people.
Mm.
Um, the washing of feet is a religious church process. And she, I think, would attend services like that. She didn't go to very many services, but that's kind of one she would think about it. And that's my term. I don't know if she would say it quite in that way, but I think she would say we need to serve people and help people.
Mm. So for me, I mean, I would sum that up in saying love, uh,
Yes.
love and connection.
Yeah.
And service is an act of love
Yeah.
rather than modern obstetrics, which is really coming in there, very personal, very kind of dominating. I know, and I'm going to tell you,
Yeah.
and we're going to do this. If the baby's stuck, we pull the baby out. And rather than go with the natural process of, I would think probably bioenergetics is the energy of our body, the process.
Yeah.
And birth is a natural process, isn't it? Um,
I could hear her saying that love is the key to it,
yeah.
to love one another and love.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think that is really, for me, that's the key. We need to put love into all healing. How can we heal really without love? It just, to me, it personally doesn't make sense, even trying. And the moment that love, that ingredient is there, then healing can take place. Anyway, that's my personal view. I feel so aligned with Eva. I feel almost
I think
as
you
if
probably would be.
I've been, channeling because I've been in this field for 44 years and basically very, very similar parallel. I'm not a physician, of course, but I would very much like her works to be honored and to be known around the world. Is there any other way that people can access her material?
Well, we've got the butterfly touch massage in Chinese, um, Latvian, Greek, Polish, and English on a hub that can be.
This is a video or a book or
It's a video that can be downloaded
okay.
and played to learn it.
Hmm.
We're working on getting the books in that form that are in those languages. And that's one of the reasons I put the speech out there to make it available to anybody is to get the ideas. Um, I have a few people who are training people and know it well enough to be training people. They've got the spirit of it. There are some people that I trained that really they never got that sense of not being great, but it's about being a servant
Mm,
and it's about bringing a community along together.
mm,
Um, and they're doing the tools, but they're really not doing general Bonner checks as far as I know, but I may not know.
mm,
But I got a person in Singapore that I think is doing a pretty good job. I've got a lady in Poland and a lady in Cyprus and a couple people in Greece and some other people in Poland too that are working towards keeping us alive and going.
mm. So would
Um,
these people be working specifically with pregnant mothers and birth, or it's helping anybody to access their early trauma so they can live healthier lives?
the ladies in Greece are doulas or midwives, some of them. The people in Cyprus, lady in Cyprus works at a fertility clinic, uh, pre-birth, birth, and after. Um, the other people in Poland that I've trained are crossovers in that. I'm working with the Gestalt Institute there as well. So it's a wide variety. The lady in Singapore is I forget if she's midwife or doula, but she's working in that area to teach. She's also working to teach older people how to do this to help the younger people, which is really quite nice.
Mm,
Um, Making them enablers of
mm,
people. Uh,
beautiful.
yeah. So, and it's the kind of thing I'm looking for is for more people to make it more available. Uh, no one, much to my surprise, I thought I would come to Europe when I came back around 2008 or something like 2010. I thought people would say to me, "Why are you here? We don't need you.
Mm,
We know about Eva Reich's work." And that's kind of I was very uneasy about being accepted. When I've been here, I've run into a lot of people that know the name Eva Reich. I've run into people who are doing some parts of her work, mostly butterfly touch massage. But I haven't run into anybody that's doing the whole thing or teaching the whole thing in such a way that people could grasp it and pass it on. And
mm,
that's a disappointment to me because I thought there would be comrades here who we could build some of that together,
mm,
but they tend to be isolated.
mm,
And I'm not real good at building community. I'm a good trainer, a good teacher, a good therapist. I'm not real good at building community. That's probably part of my background is I didn't come out of a community kind of family. I don't think Eva did either. I don't think Eva was good at building community. And I'm hoping that some of the new people will develop community. And that's kind of what I've told them is they want all these certifications. They want, give me a certificate, give me a certificate. I say, that's not the key. The key is building a community and developing expertise in this and holding each other responsible for
mm.
what you're doing.
Yeah.
And they're kind of so, oh, we got to know that we're going to get there. And I don't think they'll ever get there if they keep going in that way. I didn't do that with
So
Eva.
did Ava then, you said that she was in Europe. Did she travel a lot or
Yes,
she
she
toured
was all
around
over
the
the
world
world.
or?
She was in Japan. She was in Europe, many countries in Europe, many different places. She was in South America. Um,
Did she marry and have children or?
she got married
Mhm.
and ended up divorced. She blamed the Oregon blanket on that, saying that because that was the bedroom, he was sexually active with other people.
Ah,
And I don't think that was true, actually, but she has a wonderful daughter, Renata Moise. And if you want to see gentle bioenergetics embodied, it's Renata Moise.
mm,
Very loving, kind. She just embodies the whole principles of what Eva was trying to do.
mm,
I don't think it was easy being married to Eva or the daughter of Eva Reich because she traveled so much,
mm.
but she really has embodied that. And she was a midwife. She's brilliant.
So
I,
she received that
I,
in utero all
yeah,
the way through what Ava was practicing, I suppose.
I thought she would want to take this over and kick me out, and she hasn't said to do that yet. I would still hope she might. She would be the perfect one to do the midwifery stuff.
And where is she practicing?
She's in Maine. She's actually
Mm.
retired now, but she's trying to help the um, her grandfather's Organon. She's working for that. Uh,
Mm.
but
So looking back, did Ava ever express a desire to change something in her life or work?
I think the one thing that I remember her saying was that she always wanted to train more midwives.
Mm.
And I think if she had to do that over again, she would probably see if she couldn't get that done. She also, at the end of her life, she was saying, well, if I still had some time and more money, I'd go learn cranial sacral. And she had a particular person out in California who worked gently with babies that she would go and study with. And she was still learning. when she was at the end of her life. She was still wanting to learn. And
Fantastic.
that's the amazing part about her. She was still,
Was it with Ray Castellino that she went?
no,
No,
no, she had
sorry.
everything to do with Ray Castellino.
Okay.
It was a lady out there who was very, very gentle with babies.
Mm,
And I don't remember her name,
mm.
but
And so she used to train people. She traveled and she had her own practice. Is that correct? She had her own
well,
practice.
I met her, it was kind of towards it wasn't the end of her life, but I met her in 1985. And then she started to have some strokes in about 1995. And she actually lived a whole lot longer than her daughter believed she would with the strokes. She died at home. And one of the greatest experiences for me was going to see her when she was bedfast. And she asked me to do a couple of her techniques on her. One was the balance, and I did it on her. Went back the next day. She said, "It's amazing." In the middle of the night, I could get my legs crossed, and I'd never get them uncrossed until the nurse came to help me. And it was so frustrating. She said, "After you did that, I could get my legs uncrossed in the night."
Wow.
And then I did the metamorphosis on her, and she said, "I feel like a teenage girl."
Fantastic.
And I went for a walk after that and just cried some, feeling like that was amazing to go back and do the things I had learned from her with her and be helpful to her
Mm,
and in some way bring some peace to her. Uh,
mm,
that was quite an honor to be able to do that. Um, a lot of people where she lived really didn't know much about her work. She didn't talk about her work. She just went and did it, and she didn't talk about all the great things she was doing around people. A
mm.
lot of them never knew what she was doing.
So she didn't get much publicity in the media or anything like that.
She was afraid of it because of what happened with her father, I think.
Mm,
But Renata asked me to come and represent what Eva's work was around the world. And so I thought, well, everybody there is going to know about it. So I developed a little bit of talk. And then I realized when I got there, nobody knows anything about the work she was doing around the world. Maybe
mm,
one guy that was there. So I changed the whole presentation in the middle of doing it to try to introduce a little bit to the significance of what Eva was doing around the world. And we gave
mm,
him a gift of a butterfly touch massage on um, a DVD. We gave them a video of it that they could take home if they wanted to. Some people
mm,
came up and got it, and some people did not.
mm.
So, yeah.
Beautiful. Well, I just feel her presence so so strong. Um, is there any final message or story from Eva's life that you believe sums up her essence?
Uh, I think, I guess what comes to mind is what a woman who was trying to learn to meditate, to be in the here and now, that was one of her caregivers, said about her as her death. And she said she came in to see Eva one time. And Eva said, "Do you hear the birds singing out there outside the window? Isn't that beautiful?" And she said she'd been struggling to learn how to live in the here and now. And Eva had that right then and there,
Beautiful.
just to be in
That
the
brings
present.
tears to my eyes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was phenomenal. Uh,
Mm,
uh, so I guess it wouldn't be my words, but it would be what this lady said. She said, "I was working so hard to figure out how to live in the here and now, and Eva just did it, being bedfast."
mm.
So, yeah,
Beautiful. Well, any final message or anything you'd like to add before we conclude?
I don't think so. I've enjoyed talking with you, and I've learned a lot just being in your presence today.
Mm.
So I appreciate being with you.